Thank you. Welcome, everyone. This is the first in the series of ZerO-In dialogues, and I'm here just to set the context of what's happening with buildings and energy efficiency and renewable integration in the country, and a quick background of the MED3 program under which we are doing all this work. So. Just to look at the overall national context, India has now set a target for net zero emissions and non-fossil energy capacity addition of 500 gigawatts by 2030. That means a lot of renewable will be added over the next 20 years. From over 100 gigawatt right now, we really have a steep ramping up of all kinds of renewable energy into our grid. This scenario will also be impacted by the push for reducing our energy density and increasing energy efficiency. So the energy efficiency potential over the next 20 years is almost 200 gigawatts of this capacity that we want to see by 2030. And that looks at the other side of the balance, where you have increasing renewable energy into the grid, and you have a lot of efficiency in various forms that needs to come into our economy. Despite that addition of renewables and increase in efficiency, the trajectory for building energy use is going to grow. So the projections by NITI Aayog, you can see by 2047, the steep increase in both residential and commercial building energy use. And this continues to be a significant part of our emissions. Now, one way to look at this is to reduce the energy use in buildings and installing renewables so that they offset the energy used by the building. Such buildings are called net zero energy buildings, and they work by producing as much renewable energy in a typical year as it consumes, with very high level of energy efficiency, consuming grid power when required, excess power back to the grid or stored, and renewable energy can be balanced on-site or off-site. So as you can see, there's a lot of complex interactions required for net zero energy buildings to be operational and scaled up. So the MED3 program, the USAID and Ministry of Power bilateral program, looks at market integration and transformation for energy efficiency through buildings, cooling, and consumer engagement. And it directly addresses the challenges of mitigating climate change by addressing this interlinked challenge of cooling and building energy efficiency. There are a number of partners in this project, in this program, and they have really in the last 4 years been doing a number of activities that help us go towards that market transformation. Some of the key examples are working with EESL for super efficient air conditioners, over 150,000 procured. There are new products in the market now which are super efficient. Over 10,000 buildings retrofitted, program on healthy and energy efficient buildings launched by the minister. A new program being designed for chiller energy efficiency, looking at energy efficiency and green affordable housing, a project with Lucknow Development Authority setting the vision and actually implementing the program, which was inaugurated by the Prime Minister recently, and also looking at rural energy, PMAY rural housing, and incorporating green in the new rural housing under the PMAY scheme. We also looked at approaching green building market transformation from various other perspectives through this white paper on industry engagement. One other important component addressing this market transformation has been public procurement, and in collaboration with UNEP and GEM, launching the first ever green room air conditioners on the GEM platform, and supporting standard procurement for high efficiency appliances. Coming back to net zero energy buildings, this is something that USAID programs have been supporting for a very long time. And a net zero energy knowledge portal was launched, and it is a very, very dynamic and active portal right now with a number of interesting things on policies and knowledge and case studies. Over the last 4 years, we've done dozens and dozens of webinars with international experts. We've done study tours of these uh, net zero energy buildings, engaged thousands of people in the country and the region. And the last thing that is of interest to us here are net zero energy pilot projects, with Nalanda University being one of the prime examples of a large university campus going net zero energy, railways setting vision and guidelines for new station developments to be net zero, and finally, the pilots for grid interactive net zero energy buildings with TS Redco and TSS PDCL, and now also with Chhattisgarh joining the fray to develop new grid interactive net zero energy buildings. And we'll hear some of these through our net zero dialogues over the next few weeks. So the grid interactive net zero buildings is a strategic integrated approach which says that buildings can be energy positives, buildings have the potential to be a major producer of renewable energy, and they offer the flexibility of demand, which can really be the key for a low emission smart grid of the future. So while we have different components of power plants distribution, we have to look at buildings and all the interactions that the buildings have be a part of our this grid integrated smart grid of the future. We already have enabling policies and regulations in place. A lot has already been thought through of how we are going to do this transition. The renewable energy integration in the grid requires that we look at this in a flexible manner with electric vehicles, new demands for peak air conditioners, and other things coming into the place, and smart meters being the backbone of this, which are already mandated for all consumers. So for utilities and consumers, this option of grid interactive net zero energy building offer immense benefits and possibilities. And this is the focus of our initiative here. Again, a lot of this will be discussed and heard over the next few sessions. There have been pilot projects. One such project actually looked at how can one reduce electricity peak demand with air conditioners, and really has yielded some very interesting results that we can learn from in the future. So ultimately, the grid interactive net zero energy buildings are the future. They are the kinds of building communities and cities that we want to see in the future, which are efficient, connected, smart, and flexible. And we hope to have this as the key strategy for integrating the issues of renewables, grid, energy efficiency buildings as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanmay, for setting the context of what a grid interactive net zero energy building actually looks like. And I think that would set the momentum for the rest of the dialogue series. With that, I would like to now invite John. John Smith-Sreen is serving as the director of the Indo-Pacific office. He recently joined the USAID-India mission in October, but he's not new to the energy sector. He has served in the India mission 20 years back as well, and worked very closely with Government of India and the public sector units like NTPC and PFC and others. But John has extensive experience of this region as well, and he has served in several missions, including India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, and very recently his last posting was in Bangladesh, where he also spearheaded the energy and economic growth program. So over to you, John, for your remarks on moving towards the clean energy transition.
Thank you, Purva, and thanks, Tanmay, for setting the stage. Um, One of the constraints with these virtual platforms is the connectivity issue. But of course, then when you show up late for meetings, you can always say, "Oh, yeah, I had problems with connectivity." But in this case, I was here 5 minutes ahead of time, and honestly could not get in. But we used to say, "Oh, Delhi traffic," made me show up late to meetings, but now it's the connectivity issue. Another constraint is not knowing fully who's here. So we are moving back to sort of hybrid events where we've done some in-person meetings, but nonetheless, I'll forge ahead. So just 2 weeks ago, for example, I was with Arun Mishra, the CEO of Energy Efficiency Services Limited, on the dais. So, Mr. Mishra, if you're here again today, wonderful to share the dais with you. I did, through scrolling through, see that Atul Bali, the General Manager from the National Smart Grid Mission, Government of India is online, and Neelam Janania, Vice Chairman and Managing Director from the Telangana State Renewable Energy Development Corporation, is here, and of course Ralph Dinola from New Buildings Institute in the United States as CEO. So wonderful to have you all participate, and I wanted to extend my greetings to everyone who's joined around the world. These virtual platforms have allowed us to continue to engage over the last couple of years, despite the many constraints posed by the pandemic. So let me add a little bit to Tanmay's very good description of why we're in this business and what the U.S. government interests are. Looking at energy efficiency in buildings and grid decarbonization it's been really a key element of the US-India partnership focusing on energy over the last couple of decades. And we truly believe that together we've been able to play a catalytic role in scaling up the whole concept of net zero energy building and smart grid solutions in India. And we've done this through collaboration with Government of India on various pioneering initiatives in promoting efficiency in buildings and smart grid space. So I'll just list a couple of examples. When Purva mentioned I was here 15 to 20 years ago, and we worked very closely at that time with what was then the new Bureau of Energy Efficiency in really developing India's first building energy efficiency code, the Energy Conservation Building Code. That was back in 2007, and this was updated in 17 to include codes for net zero energy buildings. Another activity that I was personally involved in many years ago was the whole green building movement. And our initial partnership was with the Confederation of Indian Industries, and linking them with the U.S. Green Building Council, and that gave rise to what's called the CAI Godrej Green Business Center over in Hyderabad. And now, of course, there's green buildings throughout India, and that's something that India has really shown great leadership on. And the first model regulations on smart grids were developed in partnership with the Government of India, and the first pay for service smart meter pilot was designed and implemented by USAID in partnership with our colleagues from the National Smart Grid Mission under the Ministry of Power. So we're very pleased and proud of these successful partnerships with both public and private sector over the years. And our focus has always been on sustainability and viability the long-term impact of our joint investments. And to effect this, we truly believe it's important to try to facilitate a transformation of the market, and in this case, a transformation that would lead to high-performing, smart, connected, flexible communities and cities that have net zero emissions. It's part of our joint initiative with the government of India's Ministry of Power. USAID has this ongoing partnership called the Market Integration and Transformation Program for Energy Efficiency, MATRI, aptly named partnership in Hindi. And through that, we work with key stakeholders to maintain grid interactive net zero energy buildings in India. And MATRI, launched in 2017, has made many important achievements, and several are outcomes of our longstanding collaboration with Energy Efficiency Services Limited, ESL, and over the past years with the Telangana State Renewable Energy Development Corporation. USAID's MATRI has been at the forefront, really, in piloting net zero energy buildings, starting with, as Tanmay mentioned, the technical assistance to the Nalanda University and extending to Telangana and Chhattisgarh state agencies. USAID has also assisted Indian Railways to develop a vision and roadmap for net zero energy, moving toward decarbonization of the rail sector. So we're quite proud of these joint achievements with ESL, such as scaling the building energy efficiency program for retrofitting towards higher performance and demand response. And we're equally proud of our more recent collaboration with Telangana State Renewable Energy Development Corporation to pilot the first grid interactive net zero energy building for their office space in Telangana. Over the years, USAID has been collaborating with the Ministry of Power and with individual utilities to try to scale up energy efficiency in building, to manage demand, to promote smart grids, and again, to transform markets. So another example is our smart power for advancing reliability and connectivity, what we call the SPARK activity, which has supported the transformation of the performance, both technical and commercial, of discoms throughout India. And USAID's market transformation works really on building institutional capacity for better efficiency in the overall energy ecosystem. India's first net zero energy buildings seminar was organized in 2013 with USAID assistance, and the Net Zero Energy Buildings Knowledge Portal was launched initially through the PACE-D program, and that's something that MATRI has picked up on and continues to support. It's now in the 8th year of existence and contains a wealth of knowledge of global and regional best practices. Our office within USAID has recently launched a new initiative called the South Asia Regional Energy Partnership, or SARUP. And the aim is to converge distinct themes like energy efficiency in buildings, smart grids, support of utilities, renewable energy, and cross-border energy trade under a single umbrella for a more integrated approach towards addressing these issues across South Asia. Today's discussion, the ZerO-In dialogue, is an example of an integrated approach. Building energy demand and smart grid services traditionally have been distinct and somewhat separate discussions, with renewable energy providing a kind of an overlapping interface. But globally, today countries are realizing that buildings are an important last mile connection to the grid of the future, and therefore greater energy efficiency within buildings and the equipment contained therein linked to that energy ecosystem really represents an untapped, unexplored opportunity for all of us. Therefore, we're excited to kick off the ZerO-In dialogue series on grid interactive net zero energy buildings, in which we hope to bridge that gap. We see the dialogue as pertinent for easing that transition toward a decarbonized, decentralized, and digitized grid of the future that will support the government of India's commitments made at the recent COP26 on net zero emissions. I look forward to a very interesting discussion today and hope our continued partnership will strengthen the rationale behind a new narrative of integrating buildings, campuses, cities, and communities as a key element of a South Asia smart grid of the future. Bahut dhanyavad. Back to you, Apurva.
Thank you, John. Thank you so well for laying out the partnership that USAID has had over several decades now with Government of India, particularly with Ministry of Power, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, and the several firsts that we have been proud that of this partnership. Outcomes of this partnership in terms of several firsts, as you mentioned. And hopefully we will continue to build, and I think you are the institutional memory right now within USAID, who can say, I can say with a lot of confidence, who has seen or witnessed the journey right from the first green building that was established in in Hyderabad. And now we are with Telangana again and establishing the first grid interactive net zero energy building. So the very, take a lot of pride, and I won't say credit, but, honor or privilege to be working, jointly with Government of India and the state governments on seeding new ideas and taking them to the final implementation. So with that, thank you so much, John. And now I would like to introduce Ralph, who doesn't really need an introduction, but he is the CEO of the New Building Institute. And he's been in this green building, energy efficiency and sustainability sector for more than 20 years now, working with stakeholders across the government, utilities, building professionals, and so on. And he served as a technical advisor for the Living Building Challenge Standard. He's consulted on over more than 130 lead projects. But most importantly, he brings in a lot of experience on buildings such as the grid interactive as well. So over to you, Ralph, for your session on session on the Grid Optimal Buildings Initiative and how grid interactive and net zero buildings, what is their role in decarbonizing the building sector? So Ralph.
Yes, thank you, Apurva and Tanmay and John. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and to talk about the work of New Buildings Institute and a lot of the collaborative work we've been doing with other folks in the building sector across the U.S. And so what I'm going to be sharing, much of this is based upon our experience in the U.S. and I believe a lot of it is relevant to the work in India. And I do appreciate John setting the context of what the opportunity is here. So I'm going to provide just an outline here for the session, introduction and context, to talk about zero energy and carbon neutral buildings, and then building grid integration. Our Grid Optimal Buildings Initiative is an initiative of our institute, and then I'll wrap up with some key takeaways here. So New Buildings Institute is a nonprofit organization. We're based in the US in Portland, Oregon, and we work throughout the United States and some work in Canada as well. So we really envision a transformed building sector that is carbon-free, sustainable, and energy efficient, and it really supports people and the planet. We have 3 programs at the Institute. The first one, Getting to Zero Leadership and Market Development, is the program in which we really focus on our Zero Energy Buildings database, our Getting to Zero forum, and our schools initiative. Building Innovation is a program where we're working on research and developing best practices and design guidance, and that's where our Grid Optimal Buildings initiative and our Advanced Water Heating initiative stem from. And then Advancing Codes and Policy, we do a lot of work on energy codes, both national model codes and stretch codes and reach codes for cities and states throughout the US. So we just had our Getting to Zero forum in New York City in October, and that was a convening of the building industry leadership, talk about how we get to zero. We had a local host partner of NYSERDA. This is the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, and RMI, formerly Rocky Mountain Institute. We have another initiative called Codes for Climate. So our work at NBI, we were founded based upon advancing energy codes, and this has led to developing some of the most advanced codes for the national model codes in the US and states and cities. We, in fact, have developed a building decarbonization code that is an overlay to the 2021 IECC, and the most recent development is the 2024 IECC, which is under development right now. So this is a good resource for measures if you're looking for advanced decarbonization measures. Another initiative we launched now, I think about 3 years ago, is the Advanced Water Heating Initiative. So this is focused on transforming the market for water heating technology. In the US, about half of water heating is based on fossil fuel heat, mainly natural gas. The other half is electric resistance water heaters. And so this is a movement to completely transform water heating to efficient heat pump water heaters. And those would be grid connected heat pump water heaters, which can act as a battery for the grid when done at scale. So this is an initiative you can also look into. Getting to Zero in Schools is a focus on transforming the schools market, K through 12 schools, or kindergarten through 12th grade. And this is a focus both on new construction and existing building retrofit, and now much of a movement towards electrification and decarbonization of schools. Grid Optimal Buildings Initiative really seeks to transform the one-way grid into a two-way interactive grid with distributed energy resources. So that's what I'll focus on mainly after getting through a couple of key points here. The first of which is, we just all witnessed what happened with COP26, and focus on trying to achieve no more than a 1.5 degree centigrade increase in temperature globally. And to do this, we really want to decarbonize the building sector and decarbonize our economy overall. And we all see every day playing out a crisis in the environment that impacts people and all species really on the planet. And so we're really focused on trying to address this concern. And for the first time, it's really, I think, become a very, the arguments are fewer now that we see so much evidence. And carbon emissions continue to rise unabated. There have been reductions in the building sector in the US, but there are other sectors that are increasing. So we have, exceeded over 400 parts per million CO2, which is a grave concern. And of course, other issues abound in places across India, across the United States. Air quality disproportionately impacts people of low income, and so we need to focus on these concerns as well. So in the US and in our work, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really dealing with issues of economic disparity are a part of our work. So in the US, we one of the ways we characterize this is energy burden, or basically the cost of energy to low-income individuals. And there is a disparity geographically in the US that you can see here. And so again, a focus on really trying to reduce energy burden and focus on disadvantaged communities first and foremost. So as we heard earlier, John suggested that we really do need to bring buildings to the fore. We I think often don't think about buildings as a climate solution or potentially a climate solution. In the US, when we think about the grid and the power system, buildings use approximately 75% of all power that is going across the grid, transmitted and distributed mainly to buildings. And so, so this is where we need to focus. And so in a sense, like we are not seeing the forest for the trees because we live in buildings, we work in buildings, they're all around us. And so we really need to start putting buildings front and center in this focus on solutions for the climate crisis. At NBI, we've been really focusing on zero energy buildings and carbon neutral buildings since about 2010. And over that time, we've been tracking through a database that we have where we're seeing evidence of these buildings. So we in the US see them in every building type and every climate zone. And now we're tracking over 730 buildings across the US and Canada. And so we have reports and we have a database that's interactive if you want to see those buildings. And we're very interested in expanding the data set that we have. And we get a lot of information. So we've actually started creating regional reports about these buildings and showing, most importantly, that there's evidence that they're possible and that they can be cost effective as well. Recently, we have been working on the carbon neutral buildings roadmap for the state of New York and also a building electrification roadmap. So these road mapping exercises are very important to demonstrate how a ambitious goal like decarbonizing the economy or the building sector will be achieved by mapping it out. And it's really used to communicate with stakeholders and constituents, and it can clearly articulate the path. I wanted to point out in this particular effort that this one chapter is really about building electrification and the impacts on the grid. So we do see a lot of effort to understand the implications of electrifying and decarbonizing buildings and how that can impact the overall grid infrastructure. We have also really dug in pretty deeply on understanding what we mean when we say carbon neutral buildings. And so we've developed guidance. This is our insider's guide on how to talk about carbon neutral buildings and really helping with definitions and terminology and strategies. And so this is I think a nicely illustrated guide that you can use to describe what we say when we're talking about decarbonizing buildings. Most importantly, I'd like to share our belief that all of this effort really needs to be comprehensively understood and that we don't focus on one thing. We don't just focus on energy efficiency or renewable energy, but we think broadly about categories. These 5 categories, what we call the 5 foundations of zero carbon buildings and building policies, are what we think are inclusive of those different strategies. All of this, of course, with a lens toward supporting disadvantaged communities as a primary strategy. I just want to quickly go through a few of these to then focus in on grid integration and storage and electric vehicle infrastructure. So naturally, in terms of the loading order, efficiency first is still the order of the day. So we think that it's very important to continue to drive down energy use in buildings as we try and decarbonize those buildings as well. So, focus on the building envelope, the equipment, controls, lighting, and appliances. So again, through our database, we've been able to track and see that far and away, most of the buildings that are in our database that are zero energy, either emerging, so not yet completed, or verified, are low energy buildings. So again, first and foremost, reducing energy use in buildings by 50 to 75% is a key strategy to getting to zero. Second, thinking about integrating renewable energy, we suggest prioritizing on-site renewables as a first strategy for renewables integration, thinking about the roof, the ground-mounted systems, building integrated photovoltaics, and then, finally, if there's not on-site opportunities like in dense urban areas, then you look at off-site opportunities. So there are strategies to think about for taking credit or getting credit for off-site renewables through different contract and agreement mechanisms, either with a private party or with a utility. Building electrification has really come to the fore in the US. It has been estimated that in order to electrify buildings in the US, we would have to replace about 1 billion appliances. So this is a massive undertaking. We have about 125 million buildings in the US, and most of them are operating with fossil fuel energy. So, so this is part of the transformation we really need to be thinking about. And so, the greenhouse gas impact of this globally is about 6%. But I like to think about it this way, which is, of all emissions in the US, thinking about buildings, transportation, and industry, the building sector is about 36% of those emissions. But then when we look at direct combustion of fossil fuels in buildings, we can see that in this diagram, about 33% of the emissions from buildings comes from direct combustion of fossil fuels in buildings. And the implications there are, of course, energy cost burden, but also air quality, air pollution, both inside buildings and around buildings in communities. So the effort to decarbonize and electrify is to try and get that to zero as well. We've also worked with these partners, you see across the bottom here, the logos, to develop an electrified buildings database. So this has just started out, and again, recognizing that there's a lot of interest in building electrification, basically demonstrating buildings, again, different types and sizes and locations. We can show there's evidence that there are electrified buildings and we can move in that direction. In our efforts to support building electrification, we developed through some funding from the California Energy Commission, the California Public Utilities, the Building Electrification Technology Roadmap, or BETTER, and that roadmap basically describes the product end uses that need to be electrified, and the state of technology advancement of those different end uses and different technology platforms. So this is it's a good resource. It's actually based upon California utilities and their needs, but there is a summary that you can look at and learn about the different technologies that are being used in these kinds of projects. Also, for electrification, it's important to think about making buildings electrification ready. We see that buildings are kind of the nexus point between electric vehicle infrastructure and the grid. So buildings are where a lot of activity can happen in terms of electric vehicle charging and supporting grid integration and also resilience. I think we're seeing the advent of two-way charging, where buildings will not just be relying on building battery systems, but actually electric vehicles as batteries for buildings. So that, I think, is really coming soon. And then finally, this life cycle impacts category, much attention now being paid to refrigerants and the greenhouse gas emissions that are related to them. So while we are working to really advance the use of heat pumps and heat pump technology, we also really need to focus on low global warming potential refrigerants. And so, the potential with India, with such massive expansion of air conditioning systems, is to leapfrog with those advanced heat pumps that are using low GWP refrigerants. And so those technologies are now available, and it would be good to just completely avoid the high GWP refrigerants altogether. Another area of focus, I think, for work in India is low embodied carbon materials. In the US, about 11% globally, 11% of CO2 emissions are from the embodied carbon in building materials. So this is a more recent focus for us, and primarily we've started focusing on concrete and low emitting, the low embodied carbon concrete and steel and aluminum. And so thinking about every building component and how you can drive down the related embodied carbon and the related impacts. And then I think building reuse, materials reuse is another way to support this. So to focus in now on thinking about the broad context and trying to do all of those things well, now we can talk about grid integration, storage, and electric vehicle infrastructure. So just recently, the US DOE, in partnership with the National Renewable Energy Lab, put together this roadmap for grid interactive efficient buildings. This is their term called GEBs, and they've been doing a lot of work in this area. But I wanted to share this caption because I think this is a really important part of the story that I think John was also hinting at. Basically, the premise is that if we focus on grid interactive efficient buildings, we can really reduce the cost of grid modernization and grid infrastructure. So we have to decide when we're trying to spend our dollars wisely to decarbonize our economy, should we invest in buildings that are more efficient, zero energy, or more resilient and grid interactive, or building more and more grid infrastructure? And I would say there's got to be a balance there. But this analysis basically says that if we focus on grid integrated efficient buildings, we could basically save $100 to $200 billion in investment in our grid infrastructure. So, and you may know we're about to spend a lot of money on those things in the US, and so this is an even more important topic to be thinking about. So this roadmap is basically looking at 4 different pillars. So they're working to advance grid integrated buildings through research and development and data, enhancing the value to consumers and utilities, and then empowering the users of these buildings and installers and operators, and then supporting that deployment through their policies and programs. So this is a good roadmap that could be adapted, I think, in India to support this effort as you roll it out across the nation. So let's talk about some of the things we need to think about when we're thinking about grid integrated efficient buildings. One is, we should know that the intensity of carbon on the grid varies by different factors depending on where you are. In places with high solar potential, we see that midday is the cleanest grid that we can be using, and then potentially much dirtier after the sun goes down, right? So using fossil fuel technologies. However, another example here would be if there's a lot of hydropower, it might be variable by season because of the rains and incident rain. So this is an important way of thinking about the grid intensity of carbon and how you should design a building to address these, over the day or the year. And in places like the US, and I imagine it might be similar in India, there's different renewable resources in different parts of the country. And again, those characteristics come through. And so you really need to be thinking about designing a building to respond to those different renewable resources and time variable carbon intensity as well. So there are organizations like an organization called Watt Time that can help to evaluate the real-time carbon impacts of energy use. And DOE has a tool called Cambium that also has that data set. So that data is really valuable in this process. So we can understand that buildings, and the energy demand of buildings and the kind of long-term emissions of the grid, throughout a day can vary quite a bit. We can have buildings that have a high energy peak in the morning, and the grid can also have a peak carbon intensity at that time, and then buildings might use less energy during the daylight hours with renewables, but then a peak comes up again, perhaps in the afternoon and evening. I think this is a fairly consistent thing that we see in many places in the world. So in the US, we call this the duck curve because it is shaped like a duck. And what this is about is the more and more renewables you add, you get much lower carbon emissions and non-renewable energy on the grid during the daylight hours. But then in the evening, you get these peak conditions, which is kind of the head of the duck. And so anyway, I was thinking, because I think we've heard of there's an armadillo in Texas and different animals all over the place. So I was thinking that you can call it the peacock curve in India, perhaps, or something like that. So if we do add renewables to a building in this situation, you can see that you can drop the carbon intensity and energy intensity of the building during midday, but you still have that peak condition. So there is an opportunity perhaps to come in with something like battery storage to try and drop that peak in the building. And that's where we really start to think about the specific design strategies to address these concerns. So again, building grid integration and thinking about including storage and electric vehicles in that, we think about it with these kind of grid-friendly building strategies, thinking about permanent efficiency, just efficient building envelope and systems, and then peak shifting and flexible loads. So can you shift the energy use off that peak with controls and thermal mass and perhaps energy storage, both thermal and battery storage or electric storage? And then can you actually use the building as a dispatchable resource where you have integrated and intelligent controls, and the utility can actually call on that building to turn on and turn off different components at different times. And so this can be done, with demand control, and we see that you can do that with smart controls like HVAC. Again, water heating is a great opportunity for this, lighting, electric vehicle charging, etc. And so you can actually think about buildings as batteries and not have to have as much, battery investment if you think about, again, that 75% of energy use on the grid, for example. So this is just a diagram that shows kind of all of these things put together. The idea that you can actually drop the total energy intensity of the building through the load factor. You can drop the base load of the building overall. You can use demand response to drop energy use at a certain time. You can shift the load to a certain time of day when there's, let's say, more renewable energy available, and peak shift and use storage. So thinking about these load profiles, you can think about opportunities to customize and tailor building technologies and systems and operations to address these different conditions as they appear to the building. Again, the Grid Optimal Buildings Initiative was created over 3 years ago in order to analyze what would make a grid-friendly building, how would it perform, and what were the metrics that would make it, how do we characterize a grid-friendly building? So part of the initiative was actually to develop a set of metrics. So there's this 8 different unique metrics that make up what we think is a grid optimal building. Is it contributing to the grid peak? Are on-site renewable energy systems being used to deliver efficiency? What's the alignment with grid carbon intensity? And then thinking about the energy efficiency versus a baseline, short-term demand flexibility, long-term flexibility, and that dispatchability and overall resilience. What's the ability for the building to drift, or basically to have passive survivability in the event that there's a natural disaster or loss of power? So this is a key deliverable from that initiative. And that was also then brought into the LEED rating system as a pilot credit. So there is a grid optimal building pilot credit that will give a project points for actually doing this building grid integration in LEED 4.1. We've also developed a set of design guides and fact sheets, and this is both by building type and regions, again, in the US. But again, I think things like this could be fairly readily adaptable to the climate and building types that are most prevalent in India. A lot of work has gone into creating these resources, but they can be, again, I think, tailored to your specific needs pretty easily. So all of those are available at newbuildings.org under our Grid Optimal page, and you can find them there. A few other resources just recently, I think just last week, this report came out, and this is perhaps maybe a different climate than India, but this is a specific study on how ready the grid in New York is for all electric buildings, right? The shift to building electrification. So that's one resource to look at. Also, the General Services Administration of the US federal government has a task group that are an advisory committee that puts together different studies and advice letters to the GSA. And this one is on building and grid integration. And so this is something else to look at. If you look up this title, you'll be able to find it. And it's got a lot of good strategies and policy recommendations for the federal government for federal buildings. GSA is, I think, the largest landlord in the US, and of course works around the globe as well. So it's a good resource to be looking at as well. New Buildings Institute also has a whole set of resources that are getting the Zero Resource Hub. There's over 300 different resources that you can look for at that hub URL that you see there as well. So just, I guess, just to wrap up and summarize, certainly buildings are critical to the equitable decarbonization of our economies. So again, we really need to be kind of cognizant of buildings as that, what John called the last mile solution. We have to think of buildings more broadly and the decarbonization more broadly, thinking about this framework of these 5 foundations. And building grid integration is really key to grid decarbonization for a green and smart grid. So, I understand there's a lot of investment in renewables, and greening the grid is very, very important. But we also need to think about investment in buildings to balance that equation as we move forward. So with that, I will say thank you again, and happy to have any questions, and look forward to any dialogue and the next presentations as well. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Ralph. I think you already summarized in your last slide the kind of information and the knowledge and the experience that you shared through your presentation on the key elements of a building decarbonization program, or how building or grid integration is the key to grid decarbonization for a smarter grid. So that was really, really informative. I think it's a new, as I said initially as well, it's a new kind of thought that is now building up in this part of the world, and hopefully not only India, but South Asia, which is having similar challenges, would also be very keen to learn from your experiences. So thank you for that, Ralph. And now I would request Mr. Atul Bali, who's the Chief General Manager of the National Smart Grid Mission, to say, speak about the smart grids work in India. Atulji, in fact, has been with the National Smart Grid Mission since its inception, and has been key to driving a lot of the distribution reform programs of Government of India, Ministry of Power, with the utilities, especially the Restructured Accelerated Power Development and Reforms Program. He also was, in the National Smart Grid Mission, which is the key nodal agency or the mission of Government of India for driving smart grid within the country, right from planning to policies to programs, monitoring of those programs. He's behind all those initiatives, and a very active partner with USAID on a lot of smart grid initiatives. So over to you, Atulji.
Namaskar and good morning. Thank you, Apurvaji. I've been associated with Smart Grid Mission, of course, and USAID, of course, when Apurvaji joined into the collaboration with the Smart Grid Mission. And I think in the introduction, very well said by Mr. John, the Ajmer pilot project was a new beginning where we have tested the business model for a smart metering. And that was a very successful model. On the basis of that, the Smart Grid business model came into being and being done on a very large scale now in India. And I really thank Mr. Ralph for a very good interactive, rather I would say very informative presentation in which he has touched many, I think, good points. And that forms the basis. And I really acknowledge that what he has given a new insight regarding the construction material being the constituting 11% for the carbon emissions and other things and roadmap and all that what happened in the US. That may be the cornerstep, or you can say stepping stone for India too in that respect, although the building doesn't constitute 75% in India because we have a large population base. And going with that, I can just say that last 2 or 3 years back only, we have given access to nearly 30 million plus Indians to the electricity supply. So that is a huge latent demand that is still there in our electricity sector. And I think at the rightly touched at the beginning, I will just give a scope of that India at the moment is nearly touching, you can say 400 gigawatt of, you can say electric supply or installed capacity. And out of that, this June itself, we have crossed 200 gigawatt of peak demand. And we have met around 190 plus of that. So you can see the enormity of the power situation in India. And of course, we have been growing at the nearly electrical consumption, if you say the power consumption, 9% plus growth is going on. And there is a lot of work and a lot of development coming to being, highways, electrification and everything like that. So of course, there is a huge challenge and a huge opportunity for these all things. What we are talking of this zero buildings and net zero energy buildings. Keeping that in mind, if we see the smart grid perspective, of course, we have certain aspects of that has to be looked into. Of course, we have traversed the journey, and now we are into a huge drive of installing smart meters as a key corner step of smart grid in nearly all Indian homes. That is, you can see the enormity of that size is 250 million meters that we are going to install. Nearly 3 million we have already done. And as far as the smart grid and this building and integration and these all things goes, I think certain issues that need to be taken into consideration. And in that is, one is that I already touched that the latent demand is huge. And of course, all cannot be met by the installation alone. And we have to have more resilient toward that. And keeping that in mind, we have to keep in mind the economy, efficiency, and the expansion of that site. And keeping in the smart grid perspective, the last mile is, of course, the home, the building, the consumers. And where that, I think this concept of this net zero building come into being, and that will be of more use. And keeping in the mind that, as you have touched, that carbon emissions of that particular building and the consumption and everything, that plays a key role. And if we think of that perspective, then we can evolve into a very cost-effective solution, a solution not only for the economy, but also for the power industry as such, and the distribution being the key in that. And then comes into this demand response and demand supply management. I think my colleague and my director, Mr. Mishra, now is CEO ESL, he will be of course touching upon the efficiency part also. But of course, the demand response of that, I think we have devised this model smart grid regulation way back, and slowly the states are also coming into being in evolving that, adopting that. And keeping that in mind, I think the dynamic tariff and TOUs and all that time of use tariff, that will also play a key role into that. So these are the main aspects into that. If the see at the smart home and aspect, I think keeping in view at the moment we have nearly 60% share of the fossil fuel. And non-fossil, or you can say other fuel like that, all wind energy, hydro and all that, that nearly constitute 38+% share of that entire, you can say, 400 gigawatt of that. 390 we have the installed capacity at the moment. Keeping that in mind and keeping in mind the, you can say this flexibility in that regard, and total, I think we all know that renewable energies, how it operates. This demand response and is going to play a very key role. And EVs are coming into big ways. And India has already committed a good target in the COP21 also. So keeping that in mind, I see that a critical role will be played by this buildings and the last mile consumer as such. And all these things playing into the Indian trajectory of the demand being grown at nearly 10%, and flexibility being a key role of playing a key role into that. So all that I think points a good direction toward this smart building and net zero efficient buildings. And USAID has been leading into from front and keeping in a way, providing a good assistance to the government of India as such. And they have been collaborating with Smart Grid Mission also. And in that we have certain aspects to look into. And of course, for the utility from Smart Grid Mission perspective, we have devising and rather going ahead with certain key measures, not only apart from smart metering, but also like the grid initiative or the microgrid and smart demo projects. And of course, a new incubation center, international incubation center in the way of Smart Grid Knowledge Center, that is also being developed, already been developed, but it's being rather increased into that size proportions, so that that can test these technologies also. We can keep in mind these perspectives. And going ahead, I think this grid interactive net zero building concept is a really will be focusing on the demand forecasting as well, and keeping in mind decarbonization and digitalization going in a big way. I think this concept and this collaboration with USAID and MAT3 program will be a good stepping stone for us. And I look forward to have a collaboration and interaction and more participation into that. And keeping that in mind, I really appreciate this effort of MAT3 and USAID, and hope to go ahead in this direction with more vigor and vitality. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Atulji, for giving such information on what the National Smart Grid Mission is about, the smart grid activities in India, and what smart grid really means for the country, and the programs that have been carried out under this mission. With that, I will now invite Mr. Arun Kumar Mishra, who is currently the CEO of not only India, but the world's largest energy service company, a public energy service company, which is EESL. And but before that, he still serves on with the Power Grid Corporation of India, which is a transmission utility. But more than importantly than that, he's also the director of the National Smart Grid Mission, and we've had a long association with him and the National Smart Grid Mission. He's also the vice chair of the International Smart Grid Action Network, ISGAN, and has been spearheading the smart grid work not only within India but internationally as well, as he represents Government of India on this coalition of countries on smart grid, which is ISGAN. So we've had the privilege of working with him for several years now on joint programs, which both Atulji as well as John had highlighted. So with that, over to you, sir, as you take us through this retrofitting buildings for energy efficiency and demand response. Sir.
Dhanyavad Apurva ji, and thank you USAID for having me here and continuing the dialogue on energy efficiency as well as buildings and their role. Where to begin? I think with the Energy Efficiency Services Limited, the primary role has been unlocking the potential of energy efficiency, which is now, of course, acknowledged as the first mover or the first choice for greening the world, or for that matter, for avoiding the global warming. Having said that, we have to acknowledge that yes, the modern life is all about buildings, be it in office, be it in home, be it in shopping districts. So everywhere the life is revolving around buildings. We may wish, and we do have those occasions of holiday. A holiday season is coming on the Western Hemisphere again, and that's the time we go out. But that's an exception rather than the rule. The living is more or less around buildings, and buildings are likely to continue to play the crucial role, as rightly pointed out by Mr. John Smith as well. And thank you, John Smith, for not only that, but also laying out that what all parameters, what all metrics, what all ways the grid and the buildings can interact for making that consumption green, for making that consumption optimal, for making that consumption healthy on both sides of the divide. ESL embarked on the journey for energy efficiency through a very humble initiative of trying to manage the peak demand in India, which if all of you who has been interacting or knowing about the bulk power sector, the peak in the evening is too sharp to handle. Of course, the POSOCO and POSOCO team is doing a very good job, and Power Grid has its fair share of contribution by making one nation, one grid, and making it a wider pool available for the peak across the breadth of the country. But even after that, the peak is too sharp, and we embarked on the 12 journey of managing that peak. We did made an impact up to the 9 gigawatt, and of course, in the process, we actually transformed the entire lighting market through Ujala, where what we are having is much efficient choices for normally consumers, and we continue to strive on that, because the last initiative has impacted on the urban side, and now we are leveraging carbon finance to reach to the last consumption and even up to the rural after the 2019 extension of grid to the every nook and corner of the country. That becomes the imperative. So that's an area you will be hearing more about our ability to make the difference, that there will be an affordable, energy efficient and use product which will be used by consumers even in the villages. Having said that, and having launched in the meanwhile the programs on not only the lighting, but on cooling, on fan, on air conditioner. So all those programs make a big impact on the consumption of energy at the within building, or for that matter at consumption end of the grid. When we realize that when renewables are going to make a substantial chunk of a grid electricity, there will need to be a flexibility, and that flexibility will need a lot of policy initiatives. Some of these are being experimented. I have been part of those initiatives, my responsibility for National Smart Grid Mission, where we prod the utilities to start thinking in terms of incentivizing the consumption, not only based on the fixed time period of the day, but as well on need basis. On supply side, there have been a lot of initiative, and there is now day-ahead market as well for dynamic market, or within the day dynamic market as well. But on demand side, that the transformation is yet to manifest. But when taking those initiatives, when contributing as energy efficient product and solution, ESL realized that for enabling a critical factor is missing, and that is a dynamic monitoring of the consumption. And for that, we have taken initiative, have unlocked the potential of a smart metering market, and so much so that after a struggle of 2017, 18, 19, and 20, now there is not only a policy initiative, but a program and a force behind it, so that almost all buildings which are consuming power in 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 substantial numbers are like, and in urban centers, they are likely to see a smart meter which will give the platform for dynamic time of the day tariff, and which will enable the potential, which of course John Smith has very well captured in terms of metrics, in terms of the capacity, in terms of how that makes a difference. So at ESL, we are proud that we have made consumption side energy efficient, but then we have not stopped there. We have taken initiative to create platform so that not only the energy efficient product are having a demand side management, but as well enabling the supplier, distribution companies, and consumer to have a dynamic adjustment and to demonstrate some of those potentials. A chiller efficiency program was undertaken by ESL in one of the government buildings, and that's where we have demonstrated that there is a potential for shifting, there is of demand, there is a potential for raising the efficiency in and consumption even at other than the lighting products. And we continue to take those initiatives. We'll be coming out more than 35 technologies and in next couple of years, where we will be demonstrating their impact on energy efficiency at industrial as well as MSME sectors. And all this will create that potential which can be leveraged through policies and pilot projects and scaling up for unlocking the more than 10,000 crores of market as far as energy efficiency and flexibility and consumption end is concerned. So so that's where I'll stop. That at ESL, we are taking initiative. We are unlocking the market. We are creating the ESCO platforms. The other day we have worked with USAID, and we continue to make the difference with USAID support as well as with this support of the industry in India. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for taking us through the ESL journey and the kind of things ESL is known for being a market disruptor in many senses. And here, when I say disruptor, it is in a very positive sense of bringing in energy efficiency, and not just energy efficiency, but clean energy as a whole on a scale which is unprecedented through your innovative business models and through your ability to improve or increase the standards of energy efficiency in products and technologies. And since USAID has had the privilege to be a small part of your journey as you transformed markets and disrupted them completely, um, uh, perhaps today's session, or the first of the series of the ZerO-In dialogue, is also an opportunity and the right opportune moment, because yesterday when I was with you and your senior officials at ESL, we did discuss the opportunity of creating a new line of service which is based on net zero energy buildings, which would be a kind of a culmination of all your energy efficient products combined with renewables, energy storage, electric vehicles, all smart meters, all the things that ESL has been in the market for and driving the markets for, uh, to come on a common platform as a new business model for net zero energy buildings, and moving towards even a grid interactive net zero energy buildings. So thank you for laying that context, sir. And we would be very happy to collaborate again with you on this new pioneering initiative, not only within India, because I know ESL has its foot across South Asia, across Southeast Asia, across Europe, Africa, across the Indo-Pacific region, which is of great interest to USAID as well. So with that, I'll now request Mr. Neelam Jania, who is the Vice Chairman and Managing Director for the Telangana State Renewable Development Corporation Limited. As I earlier also said, the first green building that was established in India was in Hyderabad, and we had a small, USAID had a small contribution to catalyze that, and we are very proud of our association with Telangana, state, TS Redco, in short, where we are supporting them on the design as well as implementation or construction, I would say, of the first grid interactive net zero energy building, not only within India, but it is also going to be the first in Asia as well. So Mr. Neelam Jania has had several years of experience of working right from generation to transmission and distribution sector, and has served at various positions within the Telangana State Electricity Departments. So I will now request him to give his approach of the government of Telangana towards the net zero energy buildings. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, very good morning to all, and I'm very happy to be associated with the USAID and other organizations who are our trade partners, I can say definitely, because without your contribution, we are not moving ahead on construction of our net zero energy building. And now I will be starting our presentation, please. Government of Telangana's approach towards net zero building is a classic one. And on part of this, Telangana State Renewable Energy Development Corporation is a state nodal agency for the implementation of all the renewable energy programs in the state. It is also the state designated agency under the provisions of Energy Conservation Act 2001 for the enforcement and implementation of energy conservation activities. State nodal agency for setting up of charging infrastructure for electric vehicles also. About other activities, being the state nodal agency and also the state designated agency for energy conservation activities, we are taking up industrial energy efficiency programs, perform, achieve and trade scheme for the designated consumers, energy efficiency in commercial building sector, mandatory energy conservation building code, demonstration programs, capacity building programs, awareness and training programs, National Energy Conservation Week celebrations, Telangana State Energy Conservation Awards Program. For the renewable side, being the state nodal agency, solar rooftop programs, technical feasibility studies on all the renewable energy projects, megawatt scale renewable energy projects, DPR development and its implementation. And on the electric vehicle front, campaigning being taken up for the Go Electric campaign, installation of charging infrastructure across all the state, penetration of EV usage to all the market stakeholders. This is a glance, what are the renewable energy mix in the state of Telangana for an understanding. And as of now, 25% is the mix ratio as of 2021. And the total renewable energy installed capacity in the state is 4.3 gigawatts as of October 2021. And our plan for the renewable energy additions in future, TS Redco is working with many stakeholders in upcoming renewable energy technologies. Geothermal project Manuguru is with the assistance of Singareni mines is under progress. It's first of its kind in the southern region. And another one is municipal solid waste to energy of 19.8 megawatts capacity plant is running successfully at Hyderabad with the latest technology and an accumulative capacity of 65 megawatts MSW-based power projects are under the pipeline. Again, on the CBG front, a CBG plant with the landfill gas and industrial waste of 2000 kg per day is running successfully, and an additional capacities are under pipeline. TS TEDCO is working towards the initiation of hydrogen fuel-based R&D projects in the state of Telangana with the assistance of Jawaharlal Nehru Technological University and Indian Institute of Chemical Technology. And due to our various works upfront in the energy conservation activities and also on the renewable front, we have got the second prize from the Government of India, Ministry of Power. TS TEDCO received the second prize in National Energy Conservation Awards 2020 from the Honorable Minister of Power, Shri R.K. Singh Garu, on January 11, 2021, for the successful implementation of the energy conservation activities in the state of Telangana. And also it bagged award from the MNRE for successful implementation of solar energy programs in Telangana. Further, Telangana state stood second in position with the A++ rating in SARAL ranking systems rating during the 19 and 20 under solar PV rooftop programs. Our achievements and plan for the more EE projects. With the implementation of around 13 lakh number of LED streetlights program in the state so far, it has reduced the power demand of 115 megawatts. And also in the pipeline of another 18 lakh streetlights in all 12,786 gram panchayats across the state. And the program has been initiated as of now. With the completion of this project, 160 megawatt power demand reduction in the entire state has been estimated. And distribution of energy efficient appliances and also the streetlights program have saved around 1,005 gigawatts of energy per annum in Telangana, which is an equivalent to the 0.82 million tons of CO2 emissions reductions. These are the various implementation programs of ECBC in the state of Telangana. Since 2018, the code is mandatory through the online building approval system of all urban local bodies in the state. As on date, 430 buildings are compiled as per the ECBC with an estimated energy savings of 337 gigawatts per annum, which is an equivalent to the reduction of 0.28 million tons of CO2 emissions. The year-wise number of ECBC compliant commercial buildings are shown in the graph, please. Model ECBC certificates issued by the empaneled ECBC third-party assessors. Without the ECBC certificate, no commercial building will get construction approval and occupancy certificate from the urban local bodies of the Telangana state. Then coming to our net zero energy building, it is in a process initiated with the construction of our own office building with the super ECBC compliances and grid interactive net zero energy building concept. Bureau of Energy Efficiency, Ministry of Power, Government of India has supported this program initiative with an assistance of 5 crores, and MNRE is also providing its support to make it as a net zero energy building. Total built-up area of the building is around 5,000 square meters, and EDS Global under USAID Maitreyi program is providing the hand-holding support to TS TEDCO in all respects. And our co-partner Telangana Southern Power Distribution Company Limited is also partnered with our organization in this construction, showcasing the energy efficient features to all the stakeholders. The main features of this building are aiming towards the net positive. EPA of the building is an estimated at 45 kilowatt hour per square meter per year. Energy generated on-site would be more than the energy consumption in the building. The main features of the building that includes energy efficiency technologies and passive design strategies, HVAC system, radiant cooling with the highest energy efficiency technology, high energy efficient lighting system with the occupancy sensors, BLDC fans, movable external shading, AAC blocks, and maintaining the appropriate U value for the reduction of maximum heat gain and lowest SHGC glass. Utilization of maximum natural daylighting and natural ventilation. Renewable energy power generation includes solar PV rooftop, BIPC on courtyard and southwest face, micro and wind turbines, off-grid grid systems, solar AC systems, electric vehicle charging points, real-time energy display, building management system, environment maintenance system, electrochromic glass, etc. of the entire features. Location of the building and design views you can be seen. It is a very paramonic and quite opposite to the new secretariat building coming up from our government of Telangana and near to the Hussain Sagar Lake, which is the heart of the city. You can see the top view of the building on the terrace on the top slide and external movable shadings shown on the right side. This is the front view of the building and the solar PV rooftop on the top side and the real-time energy dashboard is on the verticals. Thank you for giving me an opportunity, USAID and other colleagues who are patiently listening to our program.
Thank you, sir, for taking us through your journey of establishing the first grid interactive net zero energy building in Telangana and spearheading that effort. And we are very thankful to you for giving us that opportunity of partnering with you to support this design and construction as well. I think, sir, you have already kind of paved the way for many more such buildings to come in India. And as they say, unless seeing is believing. So when your building will be constructed and even during the course of its construction, already, for instance, other states have started approaching USAID for similar building and with the vision, as you just rightly pointed out, not just net zero, but moving towards a net positive kind of building and campus. So other states are also looking at you as an example that you are setting, and we have started work with them as well to, take them through the same concept and the design which you have kind of shown your leadership on. So with that, for the today's dialogue series, we've come to an end in terms of the presentations and the experiences of our different speakers, right from a state agency to a national smart grid mission to an international agency in the form of National Building Institute. And now we will open the floor. So we've had experiences across the board, and that's very valuable for kickstarting a dialogue on this whole initiative. With that, I can see a lot of question answers already there in the Q&A box. But now I will request Tanmay also to join, moderate this question answer session with the participants who've been queued in so patiently all through. Over to you, Tanmay.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Apurva. So I request anyone who has a question to please type it into the Q&A box, and we will take up the questions. We also have a number of questions that have already been answered, so please do review them as well. Also, we have a number of questions about case studies, specific technical issues. So we wanted to reiterate that this is a dialogue series. This is the first one in the series, and over the next few months, you will see a number of these sessions that focus on various aspects of net zero energy buildings and their grid interactions, different technologies, the business models, the design options, as well as the role of occupants and consumers in that. So we also will be bringing in a lot of global perspective by bringing in more speakers from NBI as well as other institutes. We have speakers from LBNL and NREL and others who would all be bringing in their experience over the next few weeks. So please be tuned in and watch out for that. We have a few questions here, so I would like to say, start with maybe the first one. Okay, let's start from. So Saket has a question about the estimates of percentage saving from JEB beyond a very efficient building, say ECBC plus. So in terms of efficiency and overall energy saving. So Ralph, maybe that's a question you could answer. If going for grid optimal means that your energy savings for the building also increase.
You know, I would suggest that building grid integration doesn't always result in additional energy savings. You know, the energy savings are kind of a separate thing. What grid integration helps you to do is to basically potentially reduce the cost of peak energy. And so if there are you know, rates that are going to be charged because you're using energy during a peak, then you're going to be able to save there. And you know, things like batteries actually use more energy than not having batteries. So because there's this question about round trip efficiency of charging and then discharging batteries, but they do offer a benefit to both the utility and the building owner if rates are set appropriately. So if you do have, you know, peak time rates, then it's a great strategy, and it will be beneficial to reduce the overall load on the grid. And you know, quite often the power grid is, you know, has, you know, multiple factors of additional capacity only to serve those peaks. And so and in places like the US, you know, what they call peaker plants, very dirty, smaller plants are basically turned on to address those peak energy demands, and that causes a lot of pollution and it causes a lot of carbon emissions. So so you don't necessarily garner more efficiency with building grid integration, but you do get some other benefits. I would say, like, some of the strategies could deliver more benefit. For instance, you know, thermal energy storage can basically make your heat pumps more efficient. So anyway, but I think really the key strategy there is to use as much of the renewables as you can, store that energy, and try and drive down your peak energy use.
Thank you, Ralph. In fact, there's a follow-up question that I have for you is, you know, if we are looking at the overall benefit to the grid and to the end user in certain ways, what do you think will be the key drivers for the building owners and developers to move towards grid optimal buildings? So from an owner or developer perspective.
I think, you know, one thing, of course, what I just mentioned, which is not to pay peak demand charges, because peak demand charges can be sometimes, you know, 100 or, you know, or more percent greater than regular rates. So if you're trying to address peak demand charges, I think that's happening in commercial buildings, you know, all over the place in the US. I think that the possibility of resiliency, right? So designing, there was a question earlier about islanding, and, you know, a lot of these buildings that are being built with building grid integration are also being designed to be islanded, and that's not always the case. Sometimes, you know, like I have photovoltaics on my house. If the grid goes down, I can't use them; they get shut off. So I think you have to be thinking about designing for islanding and resiliency as well. And you know, that's also just a great strategy, just to have that kind of continuous power. And so anyway, so it can be used not just during some you know, natural disaster event, but just to ensure that you've got good, reliable, and clean power.
Great, thank you. I had a question for Mr. Bali along these same lines. Do you think that in Indian context, with the experience of working now for several years on the smart grids, will utilities in India be interested in this grid integration, net zero energy buildings to address these issues of demand variations and flexibility challenges, Mr. Bali?
Why not? But it depends. As you see the demography and the everything in Indian context, as our I think panelist from Telangana was very well explaining, they have going to develop a building with an EPI of 40, and at the moment in India and otherwise we have 200 plus EPI standards as such. And commercial building, definitely we can go for that. And even for the government buildings, as you can see, the government started with this smart metering, asking first the public utilities and public offices to start with that. So keeping that in mind, we have a great scope in that. But of course, keeping in view the economic condition and the rural urban mix and all that, it will take time. But of course, we can very well venture into that concept, and microgrid, off-grid, they also have the microgrid, off microgrid building like that. So we can have that. We do have a very well scope of that. But slowly it will get into that.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mishra, I know that you have always looked at these issues of renewables and energy efficiency in a very broad, holistic way, because they're all linked to each other. So, ESL has been leading this integrated approach to energy efficiency and renewable energy, especially in buildings. And now, when you see the work where it is now moving towards more EVs and battery storage, does it make a case for looking at this kind of an approach from a utility, from in fact, renewable energy, utility, and buildings in a holistic way towards going towards our net zero emissions target?
Yes, I think at the core of my thought process, the time is already there. All the three needs to do. But are they doing? Not really. Why? The institutions have their dynamics and path dependencies, and as distribution utilities, they are focusing more on supply side management, and they are not that much currently having the processes, the dependencies, the inclination to go for the demand side dependencies. They continue to see the demand as, majority of them, they continue to see demand as something for which they exist, and they would rather not like to tamper with it. They would rather like to serve it. So that's the blueprint on which they have been raised, and that blueprint needs to change. And as any change, there is a learning curve, and I see the experiments being undertaken by, say, UP regulator for peer-to-peer power exchange, or for that matter, the metro utilities in terms of making a battery supportive kind of a microgrid for a building. So those initiatives that attempt to learn, that attempt to not ignore, and of course the rooftop, that's already talk of the town, and there have been to and fro consumer, so many consumers would like them, so many utilities who are actually aware of the fact that what impact it has on their ability to manage, as while there is no saving on infrastructure, while their ability to charge for it. So those challenges are omnipresent, and they will remain, because that there exists a blueprint on supply side, through supply side management, and unless we start addressing it, and if we start opening everything, there will be a floodgate, and we may or may not be able to manage the transitions. So that just transition dialogue is building around it, not only on people side. We have to think of just transition for the utility side as well, and then grow out of these, what should I say, complex, seemingly unsurmountable problems, but actually the solution lies in making the theoretical construct of building the solar and the grid being complementary to each other, being more predictable to each other, being ready to discipline themselves so that the other one is not really jeopardized, and we have a good quality of life, we have a synchronized grid, and we have an all-round savings. They come in terms of the better future through postponing, mitigating, avoiding global warming. They come through some savings in your current transaction values, and they come through for discounts as well, for not having to invest, not having to search for that real space where they want to put in a bigger transformer, where they want to put in a larger footprint transmission line. So the savings are there, they are hidden in somewhere in not looking the world the historical way, but looking at it in a different way. And that partnership has to emerge. It is not yet there, but that holistic, we have to start saying it, we have to start building in our blueprint, we have to start creating those platforms, however minuscule they are, but that's the only way we are going to have a better future sooner than later.
Thank you so much. I think we have a couple of more questions we can take. Mr. Janaya, from the Telangana perspective, you've been a leader, as you've shown that in building code implementation, and now you're leading the case with your own building, which is in fact very interesting because following the public procurement norms, being a public entity, you're able to look at a path-breaking approach to your own building. So I just wanted to hear about what would be your advice to other state agencies, because many of them want to go that way. And what would you think they need to do to enable them to also look at their buildings, code implementation, and such initiatives like what you have done? Any advice for other state agencies?
Yeah, actually, I have got inspiration from many a number of interaction sessions being held with you and all other people with the BE during my period since 2.5 years past, and since 6 months onwards, I have been tied up with you now. So after seeing all this, our building should be a role model one. When we are asking others to follow the ECBC norms and other aspects, let us start with our own building first, and we will. Then I have approached my government, and they have suggested me to go ahead, and with the blessings of our CM sir, who is also a pioneer in green energy concept, and within the 7 years of his assumption of charge as a CM, more than 400 tree saplings, 400 crores tree saplings were being planted in the state of Telangana. He is a man of green. He always wants to have a green energy and green storage policies. That's the reason I am very much impressed by the ways you have been projecting the structure, and you are projecting the design aspects, and also assisting our building. And definitely it will give a role model for all the state designated agencies who wants to have a showcase of their piece of building for all other departments like roads and buildings and other all government buildings which are supposed to be coming in the future days. In fact, just now I have seen that Grid Zero, whatever the interactive grid, that the school buildings upcoming in our state, who wants to have a tie-up with you also for having a Grid Zero, that whatever the zero building concept for all our schools. There are about 3,000 schools are coming in the state of Telangana, and we will have definitely a separate agreement with you, and we will proceed to have a role model even on the schools front also.
Thank you, sir. I think the last question, we have a number of questions open in the Q&A, and I think we will respond to all of them individually as well, even if we can't get to all of them right now. One question that keeps coming back, Ralph, is the technical and the financial implications of grid interactive net zero energy buildings. And this, in fact, is a thought that was conveyed to be by Mr. Padmanabhan, in fact, last night when he was looking at it, is what will be the challenges of this two-way communication between the utility and the building? And the second related question is, does it require a new business plan? Because you're looking at the benefit which is accrued at both ends because of actions being done by the owner or the developer. So the challenges of two-way communications and this business plan.
It is certainly a challenge because most utilities were set up for one-way delivery of power, right? And so you have central generation and distribution, transmission and distribution, and really all of those systems were not intended to have that kind of two-way. But the fact that more and more renewables have been integrated at the building scale and at the utility scale means that utilities and owners understand the relationship that they need to form and technically how it needs to be done, through net metering, through putting the right switch gear in place and such. So the question about, I know there was a question in here about net metering as well. The question about rates and compensation and arbitrage and all of that, it does require a new business model for sure. And there's a lot more complexity to that I'm not an expert in, so I won't pretend to be. But one thing I would suggest is it would be wise, for the people that are working on this to envision a future where it is fully integrated. Think out 10, 15, 20 years. Hopefully it's not going to take that long. But if you think to that future where there's vehicles that are two-way charging and you've got buildings that are islandable and have storage and renewables, and it all works, then the question is how did you get there, right? So what are the kind of strategies and the business models that are going to get you there? And I would say that there are places around the world where this is starting to happen. I think high penetration of renewables in Hawaii. I know Hawaii and India, parts of India have maybe similar climate, but they're grappling with it because they are literally an island, in the middle of the Pacific, and they have a lot of fossil fuel resources that they're trying to get rid of. So they have high renewables penetration. They've got building grid integration, and they're really looking at electrifying transportation. So I would definitely look at examples happening around the world, and I would think about that future and think about that kind of ideal and kind of work backward, from there.
Thank you. We have a few more questions, but I think we're running out of our allocated time. So I would thank everyone and go back to Apurva now for your wrap up and the way forward. But maybe you could take one more question, which we have that maybe Apurva, you can answer from Craig, because you've been a part of the ENS, the Residential Building Energy Code work, Apurva, with BEE. The question is that can something like this also contribute towards residential buildings and code compliance for residential buildings that you see in India? Apurva, and then over to wrap up for you.
Thank you, Tanmay. Bye.
You're on mute, Apurva.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Tanmay. And interestingly, yes, why not? I mean, I do see the same concept could be applied for the residential sector as well. because at the end of the day, a building is a building. Of course, the demand varies from residential to commercial to office. But in the case of Nalanda, for instance, we've seen a kind of a campus which has all kinds of buildings, right, from residential to some commercials, as well as office. So I think this is a case which definitely is applicable to all types of buildings across different climatic zones, across different building types. So uh, as we kind of go along this work, probably we will take up some more projects in the residential side as well. Once we establish the techno-commercial feasibility of such buildings through the demonstration projects such as Telangana and many others to follow.
Thank you. So I think over to you for just your final thoughts and wrapping up.
So first of all, a big thank you to all the speakers as well as all the participants who are part of this ZerO-In dialogues. And just as before I kind of thank each one of you, just as next steps, this was the first of the series, but we will have the next one on 22nd December, which would be more based on technologies in this area. And the four key areas are the enabling policy, technology, and integrated design and consumer engagement. So we will have one session each on each of these areas under the ZerO-In dialogues. 22nd December is the next date to look out for. And then in January, we will follow up with two more. The end result of this ZerO-In dialogues would be actually a white paper that we will develop, which will kind of bring in the insights and experiences from all this dialogue, all the elements which will be discussed as part of the dialogue series, and which would kind of serve as a basis or a foundation for future work on grid interactive net zero in energy buildings, not only for India, but for South Asia as well. So that's our hope, that we will bring out a white paper which would be released in the final session. And, we would, continue to work with all the stakeholders, right from, building professionals to grid professionals to utilities, kind of integrating them as part of this strategy to promote the grid interactive net zero energy buildings, which as a big contributor to decarbonization of the grid, as well as also to the net zero emission strategy of the country as well. Having said so, at USAID, what we have typically always done and are also doing in this area is, while we continue to initiate new ideas in different domains, and here it is about grid interactive and ZEBs, we also kind of establish the proof of the viability of such ideas through demonstration projects, just like we've done with Telangana. We are doing it with other state as well, and through Nalanda, and many such efforts in the past or current. And we will continue to do that, demonstration projects, which are actual deployment projects, not just pilots, but these are actual buildings, campuses, and combining them with integrating them with a smart grid. So as we continue to do that, but we would also seed in, we would also kind of continue with these kind of dialogue series, or even if we, basically promoting more information and knowledge on these aspects to a wider community as well. So with this kind of approach, we hope, just like the whole green building movement was set up many years back, and John is a witness to that. Even while, in fact, when we were discussing the net zero energy building strategy as part of our USAID and Government of India collaboration, this was a thought that came to our mind last year, that since we have built in from energy efficient buildings to energy conservation building code to a net zero energy building, what next? And that's where, because at least I've had the privilege of working both in the building sector as well as in the smart grid sector, how can we integrate the two and bring in a new narrative of a smarter grid with buildings as a key element. So that's what we hope to keep building on in future. And with that, I would like to close the proceedings of the day. But before that, a big thank you to all our key speakers, John, Mr. Mishra, Atulji, Ralph, who has brought in such wealth of information and experience from US, and of course the team, EDS team, which is our eyes and ears on ground for USAID on any of the building issues. Tanmay, led by Tanmay, Anamika, Nidhi, and many more in his team. I may not take everyone's name, but a big thank you to all of you for being part of this new narrative. And of course, a big thank you to all the participants who have stayed tuned in for the last 2 hours, right in the morning of a Friday. So thank you again, and look forward to seeing you again on 22nd December. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Really interesting discussion. Thank you for including me.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Janaya. And for everyone, we will have another detailed session on the TS Redco pilot. So please tune in if you want to know more details. We will have a future session on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanmay and Apurva and other team.